They slid deeper into the valley. The walls rose higher. The sky narrowed to a strip of turbulent gray above. The snow under the tires changed texture, from crusted, wind-packed layers to softer drifts that hissed as they parted around the trucks. The wind funneled through the gorge, carrying a faint metallic tang that Ghost didn't like. Her shoulders itched under the weight of the rifle strap. She shifted, put one eye back to the periscope, and followed the line of those disturbed rocks along the ridge. The closer they came, the more the pattern nagged at her. It wasn't just that the rocks were irregularly spaced. It was what lay between them. Darker seams in the snow, lines that suggested buried cable or maybe shallow trenches. She exhaled slowly. "Major," she said into her headset. "Rear overwatch. You picking up the ridge to the east?" Harker's voice came back, faintly distorted. "What about it, Ghost?" "Recommend we halt and dismount before we pass under those rocks," she said. "There's structure up there. Tracks in, nothing out. It's a textbook." Her words vanished in a spike of static. The channel blasted white noise into her ear, loud enough that she winced. She pulled the headset away, heart rate ticking up. "Ruiz, you getting that?" He tapped his earpiece, frowned. "Nothing but fuzz. Try backup." He switched to the auxiliary set, the one that piggybacked off a different frequency stack. For a moment, the world went quiet. "Say again, this is Falcon 1. Reading your storm front, moving faster, you've got." More static, harsher this time, like someone dragging a shovel across rock. Ruiz grimaced. They weren't kidding about interference. Ghost felt the hair at the back of her neck stand up. The text complaints, the strange glint on the ridge, the line of rocks. All of it clicked into an ugly shape. She opened her mouth to speak. The mountain beat her to it. The first explosion came from under the lead truck. 1 second it was there, plowing doggedly through the snow. The next it jerked upward like a toy kicked by an invisible boot. Fire and metal roared outward. A ball of dirty orange flame punched through with jagged black shapes. The blast lifted the vehicle half a meter, shredded its front end, and slammed it sideways into the rock face in a spray of snow, glass, and steel. Even before the shockwave hit the rest of the convoy, a second detonation erupted under the rear truck. Ghost saw the snow hump directly in front of her blossom into a blooming ring of fire and debris. Instinct yanked her down, her body folding over her rifle. The blast slung shrapnel and packed snow into the rear hatch like a battering ram. Something punched the ceiling above her, leaving a fist-sized hole that shrieked as air and snow whirled in. The truck lurched, shrieked, and slammed to a halt at a crooked angle. The engine died mid-growl. Silence flashed white for half a heartbeat. No engine, no comms, just the hiss of falling snow. Then the valley lit up. Heavy machine guns opened from both ridges, their fire overlapping in deadly cones. The sound was a constant, grinding roar. Tracers poured down in thick streams, ricocheting off rock, punching through truck plating, filling the air with streaks of color. "Contact! Contact! Contact!" Someone screamed on an open channel, but the words broke into static halfway through. Ghost training took over. She kicked the rear hatch out, rolled into the snow, and felt the bite of cold through her gear. Ruiz landed beside her, grunting as his knee hit a buried rock. "Smoke!" he yelled. She grabbed a grenade from his vest, pulled the pin, lobbed it into the open space between their crippled truck and the wall of the valley. It popped with a hollow crack, vomiting thick gray smoke that the wind seized and dragged into streamers. "Out, out, out!" Briggs' voice bellowed. "Form on the burning bus." Ghost slid behind the rear wheel well, using the ruined truck as partial cover. She pressed her cheek to the icy metal and wormed the rifle forward, the barrel clearing the tire by inches. Through the first tendrils of smoke, she saw movement on the left ridge. Figures, dark against the snow, rose from behind those disturbed rocks she'd studied. They moved like people who knew what they were doing. No hesitation, no wasted gestures. Their faces were buried behind goggles and masks. Their weapons were a mix of rifles and heavier stuff. A tripod-mounted gun already chattering, muzzle flares strobing, a long tube on another man's shoulder, unmistakable silhouette of a launcher. She took the shooter with the tube first. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, firm and familiar. The crack echoed between the valley walls. The man with the launcher jerked once and fell backward. The tube slid from numb fingers, clattering down the far slope. Ghost worked the bolt, breath steady. To the right, on the opposite ridge, she caught the distinctive boxy shape of an antenna array. It jutted from a nest of sandbags as if it had grown there. A small team hustled around it. One man with a headset talking rapidly into a handset, another feeding a cable into a generator box. "Jam team," she muttered. Ruiz followed her line of sight. "That'll be why we can't hear anyone swear properly," he said tightly. "We drop that, we get our voices back." "Not yet," she said. "There's bigger teeth biting right now." A burst of machine gun fire raked the valley floor. One of their soldiers, Frost, the tall corporal, tried to sprint from the command vehicle toward the cover of the burning lead truck. The round stitched the snow around him in a lethal zipper. One caught his calf, snapping his leg sideways. He went down hard, disappearing behind a spray of powder. Covering fire, Briggs roared. "Put on that nest. Suppress." Rounds cracked from the Allied positions, but their fields of view were limited. The valley walls meant anyone standing long enough to aim properly became a target. The enemy had the high angles. They'd chosen this ground and prepared it. Mortars started their slow, deadly march. The first shell hit wide, far behind the convoy, kicking up a column of snow and rock. The second walked closer. Whoever was up there adjusting was good, each round bracketing the line of trucks tighter, finding the rhythm. Ghost's muscles tensed. She searched the ridge lines for the mortar spotter. It was like looking for a specific snowflake in a storm. "See anything?" Ruiz rasped. "Not yet," she said. "But he's up there. He's always up there." A nearby boom shook the earth. The rear truck shuddered. Something heavy snapped with a metallic scream. A shard of shrapnel scythed through the air, catching Ruiz high on the thigh as he shifted. He gave a shocked grunt, then a harsh curse as he dropped to one knee. Blood bloomed against the white of his oversuit, too bright. It steamed in the bitter air. "Talk to me," Ghost said, eyes never leaving the scope. "Grazed," he lied reflexively, then winced as his hand found the wound. "Okay, not grazed. That's deep." She didn't look. She couldn't, not yet. Her world had narrowed to a strip of ridge and sky, the crosshairs tracking for that slight difference in movement, that silhouette that meant coordinates and corrections. On her headset, for a second and a half, the jammer faltered. "Convoy, this is Falcon 1. You are, repeat, you are bracketed. We see impacts walking. We can't." Static swallowed the rest. Another voice, higher in pitch, cut in, full of strain. "Harker, we're taking small arms on ingress. I can give you one pass and a hover. That's it." It broke apart again. The jamming surged. An invisible storm layered over the physical one. "Ruiz," she said, "wrap it up tight. High and hard. Tourniquet." He was already tearing open a field dressing, fingers clumsy in the cold. "You reckon now's a good time to ask for hazard pay?" She worked the bolt, scan left. A muzzle flash winked from a recess in the rock on the far ridge. Too small to be the machine gun. Subtle, delayed compared to the others. Counter sniper, watching their angles, watching for anyone like her. She felt the faintest tug of satisfaction as she found him. A dark silhouette behind a slit in the rock, barrel protruding. The shot was tricky. The angle was bad. The crack in her optic pulled the world slightly askew. She compensated, aiming off instinct and experience where the reticle lied. She squeezed. The rifle spoke. The figure in the recess jerked back and did not reappear. "Sniper's down," she said. "Nest at 11 o'clock, Ruiz groaned, pointing. "On your left." She shifted. The tripod-mounted heavy gun chattered, spraying the command vehicle with rounds that dented the armor and punched through weaker spots, throwing off sparks and flurries of upholstery foam. She took the gunner with a shot through the faceplate, then the assistant as he lurched to take over. The weapon sat unmanned for a precious few seconds before another enemy dove into place behind it. "Major, this is Ghost," she said into the noise. "You have a jammer on your 9 o'clock. High ridge, antenna next to generator. You've got at least 2 machine guns, one down, and mortars firing from behind the horizon. You hold, you die here. No reply came. She looked down. From her angle behind the rear truck, she could see the command vehicle squatting like a wounded animal in the center of the valley. Its front wheels were twisted from the blast shockwave, but the hull was intact. Rounds spanged off its sides, etching bright scars. Enemy fire concentrated disproportionately on that one vehicle. Everything else got swept secondarily, almost incidental. The pattern was too clear to ignore. You see that, she said quietly. Ruiz followed her gaze, biting down on a strip of bandage as he cinched the tourniquet. They want the command unit, he said. Not the rest of us. Not just the vehicle, Ghost said. What's inside? Logs, call signs, keys, and Harker with his rank and his face. A prize. They want a broadcast, she said, realization settling like a stone in her gut. They want something they can show to someone else. Wonderful, Ruiz panted. We're going to be famous. Another mortar landed close enough that its concussion rattled teeth. Snow and dirt geysered into the air. Ghost ducked reflexively, shielding her scope. When the spray cleared, she saw Frost being dragged back by two others, leaving a long, red smear in the snow. The corporal's leg dangled at a wrong angle, his face twisted in pain. Medic, someone screamed, voice tearing. Handheld radios crackled with fragments. We can't hold here. They're walking it right on top of us. Freeze your asses to the deck. They've got you painted. Ghost glanced at Ruiz. His face had gone paler under the dirt and sweat. The bandage around his thigh was already darkening. You move? She asked. He tried to shift, then hissed through his teeth. I can crawl. Maybe. Climb. He shook his head once. Not on that leg. I'm here until someone carries me, or I grow new bones. She nodded. No surprise. No drama. Just a colder understanding settling in. On the map in her mind, the valley lay like a diagram on a briefing slide. Arcs and contours and kill zones. Above it, she saw the thin line of the side chute she'd traced with her finger in the relay station. The one labeled impassable. She imagined herself on that chute. Climbed it with her mind first, feeling footholds, swinging axes, row positions. Calculated angles to the ridge. Sight lines to the jammer team. To the mortar observers. To the machine guns. The mortars kept walking closer. The next one would fall among the trucks, not behind them. She made the decision. I'm going up, she said. Ruiz stared at her. Up where? She nodded toward the left side of the valley. Side chute. The one they said nobody could use. From there I can see over the lip, or close enough. I take out the spotters, the jammer, some guns. Take their teeth. You might live long enough to complain about the climb. He laughed once, a short, incredulous bark. Major will never sign off on that. Major isn't the one who has to climb, she said. Ghost, he said, voice shifting, more serious. Climb something we're not even sure holds, in a storm that's just starting, to peek over a ridge full of people who'd love to put holes in you. With all of this, he gestured vaguely at his own leg, at the smoke, at the world. Going on? That's not a plan. That's a bad rumor with extra steps. I know how to move on ice, she said. That chute is steep, but it's there. They won't expect anyone on it because they told themselves it was impossible. People are good at believing maps over reality. And if you're wrong, he demanded, then I'm dead before I reach halfway, she said, which saves us some ammunition. A mortar round landed, so close the shockwave made her ears ring. A chunk of metal whined past where her head had been a second earlier, slamming into the truck's carcass. She dragged herself back, shook her head to clear the blink of white in her eyes. Stay low, stay angry, she told Ruiz. If you see someone coming too close, shoot them. If you can't, at least insult them creatively, so I hear the laughter from up top. He caught her wrist as she moved. Ghost, he said softly, you don't have to fix this alone. I know, she said, but we both know I'm going to try anyway. He grimaced, then nodded, letting go. You bring the storm down on them, he said. Make it a bad story they tell their friends. I'll do my best. Under the cover of thickening smoke and the chaos of weapons fire, she crawled backward from the destroyed truck, hugging the valley wall. Snow bit through her gloves. Splinters of rock gouged fabric and skin. She moved in bursts, Wait for a lull, then scramble. Freeze when rounds crack close, become as small as a snowdrift. The soundscape of the valley became a distorted symphony. The steady hammer of machine guns, the irregular boom of mortars, the sharp barks of rifles, the distant, frustrated whine of the helicopter somewhere above, circling, waiting. At the base of the side chute, she stopped. Up close, it looked worse than on the map. It rose a sharp angle, more ice than snow, a narrow gash carved by some ancient avalanche. Two rock walls squeezed in on either side, forming a white, slick throat leading up into shadow. Translucent layers of snow clung to underlying ice. She could see faint fractures spidering through them, ready to shear away under the right pressure. She looked back once. From here, the convoy was a jagged line of dark shapes half buried in fresh blast craters and smoke. Men and women moved between them, small against the scale of the mountain. Flashes lit the ridges as the enemy kept firing. On the far slope, the antenna array hummed with invisible power, its small dish turning like a curious eye. The storm was rolling fully in now. Snow fell thicker, driven by stronger gusts. The sky was a uniform, oppressive gray. She unclipped extra gear, shoving a half-empty pack under a lip of rock. Took only what she absolutely needed. Rifle from magazines she could access quickly, a short coil of rope, a pair of stubby ice tools that had seen more use in training climbs than in combat, a harness, a few carabiners. The laser rangefinder went into a chest pocket. Weight was enemy number one up here. Exposure a close second. They would take her apart if she let them. She clipped the rope to her harness, more for psychological comfort than any real safety in case of a fall. There would be few meaningful anchors on a slope like this. She drove the first axe into the ice. It sank with a satisfying, solid thud. She kicked a boot point in, feeling for purchase. The slope ate her immediately, drawing her forward until she was plastered against it, hugging the cold. Her world shrank to the next handhold, the next kick, the angle of her hips, the rhythm of her breathing. Every movement had to be deliberate, every placement tested. If she rushed, she'd shear off a slab and end up as broken shapes at the bottom of the chute, another piece of debris for the mortars to bury. The valley's noise dulled as she climbed, not because it lessened, but because her focus filtered it out. It became a backdrop, thunder at the edge of consciousness. Halfway up, the slope steepened abruptly. The ice here was glassy and hard. Her axe bounced off twice before finally biting. Sweat trickled down her spine despite the cold. The wind shifted, funneled straight into the chute. Snowflakes blasted her face, stinging exposed skin. Visibility dropped from bad to memory. She paused on a small ledge no larger than her boots, pressed against the rock, and let her mind slip for a moment. There was another road in her memory, another valley. No snow that time, just dust and heat. The smell of burning rubber and something coppery. Hold position, the voice in her ear had said. Convoys delayed. Do not move into the kill zone alone. She'd seen the bus then. Civilian, painted in colors that looked almost cheerful against the drab landscape. Windows dusty, kids sticking their faces to the glass as they passed. She'd watched through her scope as it rolled into a narrow stretch of road between two low hills. An obvious problem once you chose to see it. She'd seen the glint on the hillside, the slight disturbance in the dirt. The shape that could have been a rock could have been something else. Negative, the voice had said when she'd asked permission to reposition. We don't have confirmation of hostile presence. You leave that ridge, we lose overwatch on our guys. Hold. She'd held. She'd watched the explosive turn the bus into a blossom of flame and metal and sound. The screams had been high and thin, distant but somehow inside her bones. Afterwards, someone had said, "You followed the order. You did your job." But when she closed her eyes at night, she hadn't seen the approving nods or the paperwork. She'd seen small hands pressed against fogged glass and the line of the road and the hills nobody had bothered to doubt. She clenched her jaw now, letting the cold bite into her cheeks and fingers. She was done valuing neat maps and tidy chains of command over the messy, urgent math of survival. A deep, mechanical buzz rose from somewhere below. She risked a glance back, pressed against the ice. A small drone skimmed along the far edge of the valley, roughly at her altitude. It bobbed and wove, camera on a gimbal under its belly, scanning for heat signatures or movement. It dipped closer, angling toward the side of the valley she clung to. Its rotors whined, the sound almost lost in the wind. She forced herself flat, head tucked in, trying to become just another patch of rough ice. The rope at her waist pulled slightly in the wind, a telltale line. The drone passed within 20 meters, its camera panning lazily. For a breathless second, she imagined its sensor locking onto the contrast between her heat and the rock. A call going out, rounds chewing her to pieces before she could move. But the drone kept going, drifting past, focusing on the trucks below. Whoever controlled it probably hadn't considered anybody insane enough to be halfway up an impassable chute. She let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her fingers were going numb. She flexed them, test-firing nerves. Another step, another swing. The climb became a string of small, private victories. At one point, a slab of snow no thicker than a kitchen tabletop broke free under her boot. It slithered down like a living thing, picking up more snow as it went. It slid past her right leg with a hiss, then dropped away, cartwheeling down the chute in silent, lethal grace. She hung from her axes, muscles screaming, listening until the soft, distant rumble of the mini-slide reached her ears. If she'd been half a meter lower, or moved a second faster, she would have ridden that slab all the way into the kill zone. Don't think about it, she told herself, voice barely audible against the wind. Think about the next hold. The next hold came in the form of a rough outcropping where rock met ice. She swung an axe into it, then the other, then pulled herself up onto a narrow shelf that jutted from the wall like a ledge in a cathedral. She hauled her body onto it, stomach scraping, and lay there for a minute, chest heaving. Her hands shook as she flexed them off the axe grips. The storm had thickened while she climbed. The valley below was fading into a white blur. She could still make out flashes, bursts of muzzle flare, the brief bloom of explosions, but details had softened. Up here, the world was muted. The sound of the guns came as a muffled thudding, like someone slamming doors in another building. She rolled on her side and carefully edged toward the outer lip of the shelf. It wasn't quite the exposed ledge from which she'd fired that final shot hours from now, but it was its twin in all the ways that mattered. From this vantage, she could see more of the ridgeline across the valley, though the falling snow cut clarity to a limited window. She pulled the rifle close, wiping a thin crust of eyes from the cracked optic. The fracture in the glass had worsened, spiderweb lines radiating out from an impact point. It made the world beyond the lens wobble, like warped glass in an old window. She lifted it anyway, settled her cheek against the stock, and let the scope bring the chaos into focus. The antenna array loomed clear now, perched on a fortified platform of snow and sandbags. The jammer's dish rotated slowly, tracking invisible currents. Its generator sat beside it, vibrating with low, stubborn energy. 3 figures clustered there, one with headphones, one reading off a clipboard, one scanning the valley with a small handheld sensor. Beyond them, she saw the mortar pits, shallow circles ringed with low walls, tubes angled, teams working in well-practiced drills. One man peered over a range card, glancing up between shots to take bearings on the valley's landmarks. Farther along, the tripod-mounted heavy gun spat fire into the storm, its barrels glowing faintly with heat. And presiding over it all, on a slightly higher knoll, stood a man with binoculars. He wore a heavier coat, with different markings. He wasn't firing. He pointed, directed, adjusted. The way the others glanced at him between tasks told her what she needed to know. Ruiz's observer was more than just a spotter. He was the mind behind the kill box. She rocked back on her heels and, for a moment, let the logistics of the problem line themselves up in her head. Targets weren't just targets. They were functions. The sniper she had taken out earlier had been the anti-function for anyone like her. The spotters were the eyes. The jammer was the voice. The mortar teams were the long arm. The machine guns were the teeth at the lips of the trap. The commander with the binoculars was the nervous system coordinating them all. You could chew through the lower-level threats forever and still die under the system. Or you could take out the organs that kept it alive. Her fingers moved, almost unconsciously, touching magazine pouches, counting by feel. 1, 2, 3, 4, plus the half in the rifle. Not nearly enough for everything she wanted to kill. Enough for everything she needed to. She flattened herself on the ledge, let the rifle settle into the snow, and took a long, slow breath. Down in the valley, the convoy clung to burning metal and shallow snow trenches. The comm still stuttered with interference and panic. But up here, on this thin ribbon of ice, Ghost felt a clarity she hadn't known in months. She knew what she had to do, and she knew that nobody but her could do it from here. The afternoon slid toward evening, though the storm made it hard to tell where one ended and the other began. The light dimmed from steel to slate. Shadows blurred. She felt the shift. As darkness thickened, the helicopter made its move. It came low and hard into the valley, rotor wash tearing patterns in the snow. Its silhouette was a hulking shadow against the white, NAV lights winking like cautious eyes. Rockets flared from pods under its stub wings, streaking up toward one of the machine gun nests, exploding with satisfying precision. For a brief, exultant moment, friendly firepower matched the enemy's ferocity. The nest went silent, its crew reduced to shapes in the blast crater. But the bird was a big target. The mortars adjusted quickly. Shells began to fall in patterns that bracketed where it hovered, close enough that the exploding air twisted the machine in buffeting waves. Ghost knew they couldn't do it forever. The pilot must have known too. He was gambling on shock, on violence of action, to buy time. From her perch, she had to make the gamble pay. She settled the scope crosshairs on the mortar observer. His job was literally written in his body language. He glared down into the valley, lips moving as he relayed corrections, hands gesturing to the crew beside him. Whenever a shell landed, his chin jerked, his eyes narrowed, he adjusted. She waited until he leaned close to peer at his range card again, then exhaled half a breath. The rifle's recoil pushed into her shoulder. Through the cracked optic, she saw his head snap sideways, a mist pluming out from the other side. He dropped like someone had pulled his strings. The mortar rounds that followed landed where he'd last told them to fall. They were suddenly wrong. Too short, too far, too wide. The rhythm faltered. Down in the valley, Ghost heard faint shouts of relief on her headset as two near misses became two useless impacts on empty slope. "Whoever just hit that spotter, I'll buy you a drink," someone yelled, voice fizzing through static. She didn't answer. She wasn't doing this for drinks. She shifted, found the jammer team. The man with the headphones was the key. He was the one listening, adjusting, steering the invisible noise that clogged their lifeline. She lined him up, fired, watched him arch backward, arms flying out, cables whipping away from his fallen body. The man with the clipboard dove instinctively, but she took him too before he could reach the generator switch. The third man tried to run. She hit the generator instead. The shot punched into the metal casing. Sparks sprayed out. Smoke belched. The low hum of the jammer wavered, stuttered, then died. On Ghost's headset, the world went momentarily crazy. "I've got you. I've got you. Say again, I've got you. We're in contact, heavy multiple positions. This is Falcon 1, taking heavy fire. We are bingo, fuel in 5. Repeat, 5. Voices overlapped, log jamming the channels as everyone spoke at once after minutes of forced muteness. Harker's voice cut through, louder and more controlled. "All call signs. This is Alpha Actual," he said. "We have high-angle support. Someone is chewing up their guns. Use it. Prepare to move on my." The sentence disintegrated into a chorus of gunfire, but the most important part had come through. They knew they weren't alone anymore. The enemy did too. Shouts rose around the ridges, sharper, angrier. Figures pivoted, pointing up toward the cliff faces. A few sprayed, rifle fire blindly into the storm, hoping to catch a silhouette. She pressed closer to the rock, breath shallow. The ledge shrank around her. Sudden, Hot impacts smacked the stone a meter to her right, chiseling chips of rock and ice. One fragment cut a line across her cheek, the sting delayed. She ignored it. Instead, she sighted on the heavy machine gun that still spat at the helicopter whenever it dared edge closer. Its new gunner was hunched, trying to keep his profile low. His assistant reloaded belts with frantic hands. Ghost waited for the moment when the gunner had to tilt his head up to see over his cover. The crack in the scope made his visor warp. She memorized the distortion and adjusted, firing not where he appeared but where she knew he truly was. The round punched through his jaw. He fell sideways, taking the assistant with him in a tangle of limbs. The gun's barrels drooped, unfired rounds spilling like brass ribbons into the snow. Ghost didn't stop to watch them fall. She shifted again, searching for the man with the binoculars. He had moved. He was no longer on the knoll. She scanned, heart ticking faster now, aware of the rounds gradually walking closer to her position. The enemy was triangulating on her muzzle flashes. Even bad angles could get lucky eventually. She spotted him further along the ridge, closer to the edge now. He had abandoned the more elevated perch for a position where he could see directly into the valley, unsheltered. He bellowed orders, gesturing toward the side of the valley where she lay, then toward a squad assembling near a rope coil. They were going to climb for her. "Of course they are," she whispered. A small team scrambled over the lip, roped together, axes flashing as they prepared to descend toward her shelf. Their movements were hurried, not as careful as hers. They were hoping to overwhelm her with numbers and bullets before the mountain killed them. Behind them, one last mortar battery continued to lob shells. Even without a proper observer, they'd guessed the helicopter's general area and started pattern firing around the LZ. The rounds fell in crude brackets now, but brute force could still get lucky. She pinged Harker's channel. "Alpha Actual, this is Ghost," she said. The interference was thinner now, more like a background hiss than a choking fog. "Go Ghost," Harker replied. His voice was strained tight. "If that's you knocking out their eyes, keep knocking." "They've launched climbers for me," she said. "I won't be able to stay up here long. I can give you one more gift before I go. Maybe two if the slope likes me." "We're arranged to push on your mark," he said. "We'll break for the LZ. Bird says he can sit for 60 seconds at most, or he's empty and gone." "Copy," she said. "You ready to move left?" "As ready as we're going to be." She glanced down, tracing in her mind a route his squad would have to take from the trucks to the LZ. The lane she had opened by killing the heavy guns. The angles the remaining enemy positions could still exploit. "On my shots," she said. "First one's your cue. Last one means you don't argue with me." "Ghost." But she'd already switched channels. The helicopter's pilot came in, breathless. "Whatever you're doing up there, I hope you're not sentimental," he said. "Because once I'm in, I'm not waiting long for anybody." "I'm counting on you not waiting," she said. "You and I have very different ideas about good news," he replied. The climber team was halfway down toward her level now. Their rope hung in a wavering line against the storm. They moved fast but sloppy. No time for proper three-point moves, no patience for testing every step. She could have engaged them. It would have been easy shots against their silhouettes on bare ice. But they weren't the organs she needed to cut. She looked for the man, now coordinating the last mortar battery. There, a hunched figure beside a makeshift table, maps and charts flapping in the wind. He was bent over a radio, shouting into it, trying to wrench usable adjustments from partial information. She shifted to compensate for the cracked scope and the wind gusting across the muzzle. Her fingers were stiff. She willed them steady. Below, in the valley, she saw the convoy begin to stir. Figures rose from behind cover, legs unsteady. They lifted wounded, slung arms over shoulders. They formed loose groups, ready to sprint on a word. The helicopter dropped into view again, skids flaring as it fought for position over the LZ, rotor wash carving spirals in the snow. Everything was converging. Time, weather, gravity, choices. Her breath fogged the inside of her mask. She let half of it out, held the rest. The man at the mortar table lifted his head, maybe sensing something, maybe just reacting to the noise. She fired. The shot seemed to hang in the air, stretched by wind and distance. When it reached him, it knocked him backward off his feet. His body slammed into the table, flipping it. The map tore loose and flew up in a desperate dance before the storm shredded it. The crew around him jerked, panicked. One grabbed the radio, yelling. Another spun in place, searching for a threat he couldn't see. The next mortar rounds fell with no guidance at all. One landed so far out it exploded uselessly against a bare rock face. Another short round blew just behind their own pit, showering the crew with debris. For a handful of seconds, their barrage stopped entirely. In that gap, Harker's voice roared over the net. Now! 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 Move! The convoy exploded into motion. Ghost watched tiny figures break from the shadow of the trucks, sprinting through knee-deep snow toward the LZ. They staggered, fell, got up again. Some dragged, sleds improvised from panels and doors. Wounded, lashed down like cargo. Others fired sideways as they ran, suppressing the ridges as best they could. The helicopter sank lower, skids almost brushing the snow. Its door gunner hosed fire at any muzzle flash that dared flare in the open. The aircraft rocked perilously in the turbulence, but it held. On the ridge above, the commander with the binoculars barked fresh orders, furious. He pointed at the climbers, at the mortar crew, at the valley floor. His plan was unraveling, and he knew exactly where the loose thread was. They're adjusting on the LZ, the pilot yelled. I'm seeing splashes on my right. I've got to go in now, or not at. He broke off in a curse as another mortar round detonated uncomfortably close, the blast wave flicking the helicopter sideways. He wrestled it back under control, bringing it into a hover. Ghost shifted, searching for a new target, but the snow thickened again, a sudden gust throwing white curtains between her and the far ridge. Her cracked scope struggled to resolve shapes, everything bending at the fractures. The climbers had nearly reached her level now. She could hear them faintly over the storm, the scrape of metal on ice, the occasional shout. They were close enough that a lucky round from below could ricochet up and find her. Her last magazine felt heavier than the others as she slammed it in. She had enough rounds for a couple of carefully chosen shots and maybe a desperate flurry. That was it. On the valley floor, the pilot was shouting, voice high with strain. 30 seconds hover. That's it. 3-0. If you're not on my skids by then, you're having a sleepover. Harker's voice came back. We're moving. Hold. Ghost heard the argument forming before it happened. You bring her in too, Harker said on a private channel. His voice had gone hoarse. You make the pass along the cliff. We can grab her with the... No, the pilot snapped. I can't bring this thing that close to that wall. Not with this wind. I'll roll us all into the rock. She gets to walk down on her own time or not at all. She's the reason you have anything to extract, Harker said. And I appreciate her, the pilot shot back. But physics doesn't. I'm not turning this crate into a tomb because command didn't give you enough people. Pick who lives, Major. I can't do that part for you. Their words slid through Ghost's earphones like voices from another room. She watched her squad. These people who had dismissed her, joked at her expense, rolled their eyes at her warnings, run toward the only ride off this mountain. Part of her wanted to take another shot at the commander with the binoculars to strip one more layer of control from the enemy. But the climbers were so close now that muzzle flash would be a beacon. She could fight them off. Maybe. For a while. And if she did, if she survived long enough to be a name somebody read at roll call next week, what would it have cost? She looked down at the LZ again. She saw Mason slip in the snow and haul himself up again, teeth clenched. She saw the medic half dragging, half carrying the captain. She saw Briggs bodily shove 2 soldiers up onto the helicopter skids when their legs failed. She imagined the mortar shells finding their range again, this time on the LZ. Saw the helicopter crumpling under a direct hit, bodies tumbling. She could give them a little more time. Or she could ask for some back for herself. She thought of the bus, of that road, of the kids pressing their faces to the glass, trusting that the people with guns and radios knew what they were doing. She wouldn't be them again. For once, she wouldn't be the one who lived because she had stayed obedient. She keyed her mic to the command channel, overriding the pilot and Harker's squabble. Her voice came out the same way it had earlier, and hours from now, calm, quiet, firm. Major. Falcon, she said. Leave me. Save them. There was a tiny, miraculous silence. Then Harker. Ghost, that's not your call. I am not. It is my call, she said. Because I'm the one whose body you can't fit on that bird without pushing someone else off. You have wounded down there. You have people who can't walk. I can still shoot. That's my job. Let me do it. You are disobeying. I'm correcting a mistake I made once before, she said. You want to write me up for that? You could do it later. For now, you load that helicopter and you lift when he tells you to. If you don't, this whole valley is going to be a crater full of regrets. The pilot broke in. She's right, Harker. I hate agreeing with people on cliffs, but she's right. 10 seconds. On the LZ, soldiers piled in, crammed tight. Hands grabbed at straps, at skids, at anything that would keep them attached when the helicopter ripped away. The crew chief shouted numbers, every second a brick in a tower about to topple. Ghost scanned the ridge one last time, searching through the snow for the shape that mattered. She found him, the new mortar lead, a man with a scarf wrapped tight around his lower face, shoulders hunched against the cold, had taken over from the one she'd killed. He leaned over a portable screen connected to some kind of fire control unit, fingers tapping frantically. A radio handset pressed to his ear. Even without clear visuals, she could feel the urgency radiating off him. He was watching the LZ, that blue-green glow of the tablet's screen reflected in his goggles. If he got one more bracket right, if he corrected the next round onto the center of that hovering machine, all of this would become pointless. The crack in her optic warped his outline. Her hands shook. Fatigue, cold, adrenaline, they all conspired to ruin her. She forced herself still, leaned in the rock so hard she could feel every contour. Down below, the helicopter's engine whined higher as the pilot brought power up in preparation. The rotors beat the air into a frenzied storm. Ghost, Harker said, voice raw. Last chance. We can. She cut him off. Shut up and live, Major, she said. She centered the warped reticle where his chest wasn't, but where she knew it effectively was. She exhaled until her lungs were almost empty. She squeezed the trigger. The final shot cracked off her ledge and snapped across the valley, a thread of metal drawn through wind and snow and gravity. It hit the mortar lead square in the sternum. The impact pitched him backward into the fire control unit. The screen shattered, and the handset flew from his grip. The shell that had been mid-flight, already committed by the time he died, fell in the last place he'd called. It exploded just behind the battery. The blast toppled one tube and showered the rest in debris. The crew scattered, some not getting up again. Equipment tumbled. Cables snapped. The mortar fire stopped. Everywhere, the effect rippled through the valley like a physical shock. Enemy fire that had been precise became sporadic. Some positions fell silent entirely. Without the mortars and heavy gun and jammer, they still had rifles, still had bodies, but their trap had lost its teeth. In that sudden, fragile lull, the helicopter surged upward, yanking itself free of the ground. Snow and ice peeled away under its skids. The soldiers clinging to it ducked as rounds snapped below them, but nothing lethal connected. Falcon 1 lifting, the pilot shouted. We're out. We're out. On the valley floor, the last of the convoy's survivors scrambled, dove, and clung. Those left behind waved them up with weary, frostbitten hands, then turned back to their own cover positions, buying a little more time with their own rifles. From the ledge, Ghost watched the bird bank away, turning its nose toward the distant line of friendlier mountains. For an instant, its underside flashed bright against a tear in the clouds, like a coin tossed up and caught by an unseen hand. She smiled then, just a little. Good, she said into the storm. Something slammed into the rock a foot from her head. The climbers had closed the distance. Bullets whined and ricocheted. One slammed into the stone at her back and showered her in gravel. Another punched through the butt of her rifle, nearly wrenching it from her hands. Her last rounds went wild, puffing harmlessly into the snow beyond. She rolled away from the edge, dragging the rifle with her, seeking whatever cover the ledge could offer. A dark shape loomed above, axe raised. She swung the rifle like a club, smashing the barrel across his knee. He howled, tumbling sideways. His fall jerked the rope, sending the climber behind him into a panic. The ledge shuddered, a groan deep in the rock. The mortar hit that had ended the enemy battery had done more than shred equipment. It had fractured part of the ridge. Snow, rock, and ice shifted under her. The shelf she lay on tilted ever so slightly outward. She felt it give. There was a split second where she could have grabbed the rope, hooked a hand on the nearest climber's harness, maybe gone with them. Instead, she shoved off toward the mountain, trying to stay close instead of tumbling completely free. Her boots scrabbled for purchase. The ledge crumbled beneath her like stale bread. She fell. Not a clean drop, but a tumbling, scraping, bone-rattling slide along the ice wall. Her shoulder slammed into rock. The rifle tore from her grasp and stuck, miraculously, in a crack, lodged there like an offering. She spun around it, rope tangling around her legs, then snapped taut. The world became a spin of white and gray and dark. She was vaguely aware of other bodies, other shapes, falling or swinging. A climber's hand brushed her boot and then was gone. For a moment, the entire cliff face seemed to move, snow and debris and people all part of the same shift. Then it settled. She found herself half buried in a pile of fresh snow at the base of a lower outcrop, ribs screaming. Her left arm refused to answer when she told it to move. Her head rang. Above her, the space where her ledge had been was now a jagged scar in the rock. Somewhere up there, her rifle still jutted from a crack, jammed in place, its white-wrapped barrel like a finger pointing into the storm. She tried to stand. Her right leg took her weight. Her left threatened mutiny. She compromised, propping herself on one knee and elbow. The snow around her glowed faintly with her own blood, spreading in delicate spiderwebs. Gunfire still echoed, but more distantly now. The main fight had shifted. The enemy's focus had split between shooting at a retreating aircraft and figuring out what had just happened to their carefully prepared ridge. Beneath all of it, the deeper rumble of the blizzard intensified. The storm was claiming the mountain as its own now. She laughed once, a low, breathless sound, and let the snow take more of her weight. "Okay," she whispered. Phase 2. Time smeared after that. She crawled, slid, and occasionally blacked out for seconds at a time. Each movement was a negotiation between pain and stubbornness. Cold seeped through her gear, found the places where shrapnel had torn fabric, and gnawed at the skin beneath. At some point, she became aware of a different sound overlaying the storm and distant guns. The thumping, intermittent whine of a smaller engine. Humvee? No. Snowmobile. She pressed herself into a hollow, barely perceptible in the snowbank, and waited. Voices in an unfamiliar language floated past, closer and then further. Boots crunched. Someone prodded at the debris from the collapsed ledge. She heard a brief exclamation when they found the rifle wedged in its improbable anchor, sticking out over the drop. Hands hauled at it. It didn't give easily. The rock had seized it like teeth. Eventually one of them cut the sling and left it, muttering. She heard the pop of flares, the crack of a pistol shot as someone finished off a wounded man nearby. She didn't know if he was one of hers or theirs. It all melted together. More time passed. The storm thickened further, cloaking everything. Distantly, under the howl of the wind, she thought she might have heard another helicopter. Friend, foe, she couldn't tell. It came and went like a half-remembered dream. At some point, her body made a decision without consulting her. It dragged itself downslope, angling toward where gravity and terrain told her the valley must widen. Every few meters she collapsed, face in the snow, and the world went dark around the edges. Each time, she forced her eyes open again. Once, when she surfaced from a short blackout, she found her hand resting on the small rangefinder she'd jammed into her chest pocket earlier. It had survived the fall, useless now for distance, but somehow comforting. Proof that not everything she tried to anchor was torn away. Still here, she told it. Congratulations. Eventually, the wind grew marginally less vicious, and the slope eased. She hit the valley floor a long way from the kill box, in a shallow depression that collected drifting snow. The world was white in every direction, except for a few black smudges that might once have been trees. She lay there, gases ping, feeling her heartbeat pound in her ears. The storm swirled overhead, an angry sky in fast forward. Somebody was calling her name, she realized. Or rather, her call sign. Ghost. Ghost, if you're up there, say something. It crackled over her headset, thin but real. The jam was dead enough now that distance and the storm were the only enemies. She fumbled at her mic. Still haunting, she managed. There was a burst of static, then Harker's voice, brittle with something like relief and fury twisted together. "Where the hell are you?" he demanded. She lifted her head, squinting through the white. The GPS on her wrist had died during the fall. The map in her mind was smudged. "On a mountain," she said. "Somewhere between dying and regretting my choices. Downslope for where I started. Hard to miss. Lots of snow. I'm sending a search team when the storm lets us get a bird in," he said. "You stay put." She snorted. The sound hurt. "That works out nicely," she said, "because I'm not going anywhere." The storm held on. Days later, or maybe it was just one very long day that never seemed to end, she sat in a folding chair in a tent that smelled of wet wool, disinfectant, and cheap coffee. The medical team had patched her up, stitches, bandages, a sling, and injections that made everything feel a few inches removed. Her ribs had cracked, but not broken fully. Her left arm was sprained, her leg badly bruised. Frostbite nipped at fingers and toes, but hadn't claimed anything permanent. Outside the tent, the bass hummed, the quiet, busy sound of an organism that had almost been wounded fatally and was now healing as fast as it could. Inside, maps covered one end of the space, weighted by mugs and binder clips. Photos were pinned up beside them, grainy shots from drones, satellite printouts, blurry frames extracted from helmet cams. An intelligence officer with round glasses and a neatly trimmed beard stood at the front, pointer in hand. His fatigues were crisp, his expression tired but focused. Bottom line, he was saying to the assembled survivors and a handful of brass, this was not an opportunistic hit. They didn't stumble onto your convoy. They built that kill zone over weeks. He tapped the map with the pointer, indicating the ridgeline, the positions Ghost knew almost as intimately as the floor of this tent now. They pre-positioned explosives under the track you took in and out, he said. We've got images from 3 days before showing those rocks up there in their natural positions. They moved them, dug in teams, ran cable. They had shooters, spotters, jammers, the whole lunchbox. The interference your contractors reported wasn't weather. That was them test driving their system. They were mirroring and masking traffic on your bands, figuring out what they could get away with. He shifted to another photo, a close-up of the antenna array they'd recovered after the storm. Labels had been drawn on it in red. This isn't standard guerrilla kit, he said. Somebody gave them toys. Good toys. The jammer was configured to block your primary and secondary command nets, while leaving their own adapted band mostly clear. They knew our patterns. Harker sat a little apart from the others, arms still in a better sling, face bruised. His eyes never left the map. And their objective? One visiting colonel asked, voice cool. The intel officer tapped the neutralized command vehicle icon on the map. That, he said, based on the documentation we've recovered from their destroyed ridge camp and what we pulled out of their dead, their plan was to cripple the convoy, isolate your command vehicle, suppress the rest, then push a capture team down for the major here. He nodded at Harker. They wanted him alive, he said, along with any physical records, drives, and devices in that truck. They had a camera crew ready in a back position. We found a rig, scripts, staging notes. They were planning a broadcast, hostage confession, display of captured equipment, the whole theater. He flicked to another image, crates marked with stenciled codes, cracked open. Inside, electronics, drives, and bundles of what looked like documents. If they'd succeeded, he said, we'd be dealing not only with a propaganda problem, but a serious intel compromise. Call signs, encryption seeds, movement patterns, both ours and contractor. They built the kill box to take bites out of your capabilities, but their real bite was going to be downrange from the cameras and data. There was a murmur at that. Some curses. One soft, holy hell. What stopped them? The colonel asked. though his eyes had already slid toward Ghost. The intel officer followed his gaze. "Two things," he said. "First, whoever took out their jammer and spotters knocked a critical leg out from under their stool. Without that, their coordination went from choreographed dance to drunk brawl in a hurry. Second, the shot that killed their replacement mortar lead and damaged their fire control gear broke their ability to bracket the LZ and your withdrawing forces." He flicked to a grainy freeze frame. The moment the mortar pit blossomed inward from its own poorly placed round. The angle, the timing, all traced back along a ballistic arc to a single, improbable point on the side of the cliff. "We traced the origin of that shot," he said. "What little of it our drones caught before the storm ate the feed points to something like this." He moved the pointer to a hand-drawn diagram on a whiteboard, a representation of the impassable chute, the ledge, the line of fire. Whoever did it had to climb an unscouted, near-vertical ice chute under indirect fire in worsening weather, with minimal gear, he said. Then they had to engage multiple targets in a sequence that stripped the enemy of their force multipliers in the right order. Then they had to hold long enough for our people to move. He clicked the pointer in that fidgety way of people who've had too much coffee. "Our logs say that person's call sign is Ghost." Every eye in the tent that wasn't already on her turned that way now. Ghost sat up a little straighter, uncomfortable in the center of attention in a way she never was when crosshairs were involved. She wasn't wearing a sling anymore. If she could move something, she insisted on moving it until the medics yelled. The bandage on her cheek itched under the tape. Harker's jaw flexed. "She also disobeyed a direct order," he said, voice softer than his words, "and left her assigned position." The colonel looked between them. "And because she did, you're still breathing to be irritated about it," he said. "I can live with that kind of insubordination." The tension in the room broke slightly. A few soldiers snorted. Ruiz, leaning back on his crutches near the tent flap, grinned openly. "Permission to agree with the nice colonel, sir," he murmured. The briefing wound down after that. Questions, clarifications, discussions about how to counter similar traps in the future. Ghost let most of it wash over her. The big picture was important, but she lived in the small one. After the colonel left, and the maps were unpinned, and people streamed out in 2s and 3s, Harker approached her. He didn't sit at first. He stood over her, hands on his hips, looking down with an expression she couldn't quite parse. "In any other circumstance," he said, "what you did would get you a formal reprimand. Maybe worse." "In any other circumstance," she replied, "I'd have had time to fill out the forms myself." He huffed out something that might have been a laugh. "You put yourself at ridiculous risk without authorization," he said. "You also took out their jammer, their sniper, 2 machine guns, and their replacement mortar lead. And you held off a climber team long enough that the avalanche did the rest. That's the sort of tally I can't ignore." He looked away for a moment, then back. "This thing with the bus," he said quietly. "Ruiz told me enough that I could look up the rest. You followed the order then?" "Yes," she said. "And it got people killed." "Yes." He nodded slowly. "You'd rather live with my anger than that guilt again," he said. "That about right?" "Your anger doesn't wake me up at night," she said. "Bus explosions do." He studied her for a long time. "I'm not going to pretend I'm suddenly comfortable with every lone wolf stunt you pull," he said. "That's not how I'm wired. But I'm not so stupid I can't see a pattern either. You see things the rest of us don't. You see them early. I ignored it once up there." He jerked his chin in the vague direction of the valley. "I won't do it again." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folder. It had her name on it in stiff block letters. A red stamp reading "Classified" slashed across the front. "Command wants this buried," he said. "Operational details, your climb, some of the shots. They're going into a box so they don't teach the wrong people the right lessons." Official story will say the unit, as a whole, responded bravely and creatively to a surprise attack. No unnecessary hero worship. No names and lights. She looked at the folder. It looked back with its blank, bureaucratic stare. "Do you have a problem with that?" he asked. She shook her head. "I didn't climb that chute for a citation," she said. "I climbed it so Mason wouldn't die, face down in the snow." As if invoked, the young private appeared at the tent flap, hovering awkwardly. Sir," he said to Harker. You wanted to see me when the briefing was done. Harker gestured him in. Mason shuffled closer, eyes flicking between his commanding officer and Ghost. The bandage at his hairline had been replaced with a cleaner one. There was a new patch sewn onto his sleeve, some minor commendation he looked almost embarrassed to wear. You remember this one, Ghost? Harker asked. She tilted her head. The one who waved at a cliff in a blizzard, she said. Hard to forget. Mason flushed. I just came to say. He trailed off, words getting stuck somewhere between his throat and the rest of him. He took a breath, tried again. They told us what you did, he said. The climb, the shots, the everything. I saw you up there. Before, when we were running to the bird. I didn't know. I knew there was someone on Overwatch, but I didn't know it was you. He faltered again, then seemed to give up on eloquence. Thank you, he said simply, for choosing how you did. Ghost regarded him. His face still had the softness of someone who hadn't yet had time to grow proper armor. But there was something harder in his eyes now, something that came from having seen how thin the line could be. You ran when you needed to, she said. That was your job. I would have stayed, he blurted. If you told me to. If you'd needed. She shook her head slowly. Your bullets were worth more down there than up on that ledge with me, she said. And I needed you alive. He swallowed, throat bobbing. Sergeant Briggs appeared behind him then. For once, his habitual scowl was absent. He stepped closer, reached in his pocket, and pulled out his unit patch, the frayed one he'd worn on his right arm through more deployments than Ghost could easily count. The stitching was worn, the colors faded. He set it on the table beside her. Don't make a big deal out of this, he muttered. You start thinking we respect you, you'll get insufferable. Ruiz snorted from the tent flap. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm worried about with her. Big ego. Huge. Ghost looked at the patch, at the men around her, at Harker holding the classified folder. For a long time, she'd moved through units like a shadow. Useful, respected on paper, but always one step removed, the quiet one in the corner polishing a rifle nobody was quite sure how to talk to. Now, in their eyes, she saw something different. Not worship. That wasn't her style, and it wasn't theirs. But understanding, recognition, a place. Outside, snow pattered against the tent walls, softer now. The storm that had tried to erase them was finally running out of fury. Later, when the official debriefs were done, when the forms were signed and stamped and filed away in cabinets that would never see daylight, Ghost sat alone at a small table near the back of the tent. A new rifle lay in front of her. Its finish was clean, unmarred by battle. The stock smelled faintly of machine, oil, and fresh polymer. She ran a cloth along the barrel, checking each piece, building familiarity with its feel. The flap rustled, letting in a slice of cold air. Harker stepped in with 2 mugs of something pretending to be coffee. He set one down near her hand. New toy, he asked. Replacement tool, she said. The mountain ate the last one. He sat opposite her, cradling his mug. We have new boots coming in, he said. People will be going up on that plateau next month, hunting for any copycats who think your valley looked like a good blueprint. She nodded, eyes still on the rifle. I'll tell them about what happened, he said. Not the classified details. Those stay in the folder. But the lessons. The chute. The rocks. The way interference isn't always weather. The cost of ignoring the quiet person in the room who keeps seeing ghosts where everyone else sees empty snow. She glanced up at that. You going to tell them about the cliff? She asked. I'm going to tell them about the moment when I wanted to wait for someone who'd already done enough, he said. And how if a voice on the ridge tells you to go, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is obey. He took a sip, grimaced at the taste. Maybe I'll even make it sound dramatic, he added. Add some flares. A swelling soundtrack. She huffed out a soft breath that might have been a laugh. I don't need a story, she said. Good thing, he replied. Because it's not about you. It's about the ones listening. The new kids. The Masons who haven't yet learned what a kill box feels like. They need something to hang their fear on. Something that tells them fear doesn't get to be in charge. He leaned back, studying her. You still see that bus? He asked. Some nights, she admitted. Less now. You see the valley instead sometimes. She thought of the ridges, the rocks, the antenna array, the climbers the ledge. The impossible shot threaded through the storm. The helicopter lifting away with skids full of lives. Sometimes, she said. He nodded, satisfied with that answer in a way that surprised her. In the weeks that followed, stories about the fight in the snow filtered out in the way stories always did, half official, half rumor, half guess, that the unit had been ambushed by overwhelming numbers, that they'd held under impossible odds, that something on the ridge had watched over them. The specifics blurred, but one detail kept cropping up wherever the tale went. In training tents and ready rooms, in barracks and on transports, squad leaders told rookies about a mission where the plan went bad but the math still got done. About someone whose name was less important than her choices. Sometimes at the end of the story, a senior NCO would lean in and say, if you ever find yourself in a valley and someone on a cliff tells you to move, you move. You don't argue. You don't posture. Because if she's up there, you're already late. The line changed slightly from mouth to mouth. Words twisted, embellished, paraphrased. But one version stuck more than most. It came from Harker, months later, standing in front of a new batch of faces. The tent was different, but the maps looked the same. He finished describing the kill box. The climb. The way one rifle had taken apart a whole plan. And then he said, if a ghost on the ridge tells you to go, go. You don't save her. She already saved you. Ghost wasn't there to hear it. She was somewhere else, cleaning another rifle in another dimly lit corner, listening to the hum of heaters and the distant murmur of people who didn't know they'd already been measured and weighed in the split-second calculus of someone's scope. But she would have recognized the sentiment. She'd never asked to be saved. She'd asked them to live. The mountain had accepted her offering and, for once, had given something back.